We're discussing Malkier.
Yeah, Malkier today.
There's there's both a lot to talk about Malkier and also very little information about Malkier at the same time.
Isn't it fantastic?
It's really interesting. There's so much imagination associated with Malkier, but so little actual like on-screen depiction and description of Malkier.
Yeah, I think it's purposely set up as this mysterious topic that it gives us some insights, but so much of it we just don't know and we'll never know.
Yeah, the whole first book, Moraine is constantly kind of jabbing Lan with these references to Malkier through the entire book. And we don't hear anything about it until like near the very end of Eye of the World, when we get that little bit of exposition from Lord Agomar. I'm just going to pretend I said that right. And then he gives us a little bit of like, backstory of it.
As I think key, there's some fatherly pride as he gives that story.
I mean, rightfully so, right? Because Lan basically grew up there in Faldora.
Yep. When the 5 King's Guards
5 of 20
to make it.
Yeah.
5 of 20.
5 of
King's
20.
Guards. Bukama being the longest lived.
Yeah, at the end there. Yeah.
So, let's dig into that. Let's dig into what Malkier was, right? Because Malkier was the only country to be surrounded on 3 sides by the Blight.
Yeah, and I think in the Hunt for the Horn, the Great Hunt, they I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was Ingtar. I think Ingtar said that that Shinar wasn't even necessarily a true border country, because they were shared a border with Malkier, and only after Malkier fell did they become a true borderland.
Oh yeah, same with Arafel, I thought. He mentions both. He does mention both. Which is really interesting, right? Because there were 2 countries that went through this brutal transition into becoming true borderlanders, right? Although I will say all of those countries were a part of the original Borderlander alliance as Arthur Hawkwing's empire fell.
Right.
Like they all came together and then said, if anybody attacks us, like we will all band. And, like we won't play. Our purpose is to fight the Blight.
Right. Yeah. And they're all very culturally similar. Shinar and Malkier share the most, and Arafel, and then as we get closer to the coast, farther west, that's when the more culturally diverse aspects come in. They're less concentrated on shame being a core component of their culture. But Shinar and Malkier, culturally, from the descriptions that we've had, what little there is, they seem very, very similar.
Yeah, very similar, especially with how they approach women, right? It's very clear that talking directly to a woman in Malkieri culture is heavily frowned upon unless she initiates the conversation. And you don't look her directly in the eyes, right? Women have the majority of the power in that culture dynamic, and to a smaller degree, Shinar follows suit.
Yeah, so that's really interesting to me because the older, so we discussed previously that the Borderlands, especially Shinar, has a lot of Japanese cultural influence within the concepts of the Borderlands, and there's a lot of archaeological evidence that early Japan was a very matriarchal culture and country prior to the other influences coming in particular from what I've read and professors that I've had discussions with about Japanese history. The outside religious influences coming in really started to change that. But prior to external religious concepts coming in, it was a very matriarchal culture.
Yeah, and what's really interesting from our views and actual pictures into Malkier culture is the idea of the one, right? That the experienced woman picks a boy to have their first sexual experience with, right? And after that, there's huge obligation for the male to that woman. And that's essentially what the whole plot for Lan is in New Spring.
Yeah, it's all based around that, for political purposes. But yeah, New Spring is a very interesting look into the Malkier culture, where like the New Spring is really, I think, our greatest source of Malkier cultural information.
Yeah, with the Carniera being the sexual partner, as well as how boys grow out their hair, and then once they become a man with the Carniera, they cut it into a weave and give that as a gift. And that for nobles, at least, it was very common for arranged marriages, but that was usually done by one's own mother, right? And then it like has this very intricate weave of who's the next in line to do that if your mother's no longer alive, right? Like it's your sister, like your mother's sisters, and then your father's sisters, and then it moves to daughters and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? Which is all very interesting from a cultural standpoint.
And very different from American culture and how we handle those things.
So I want to move into really quick the fall of Malkier, because it's such an interesting topic that I think is very relevant to the actual story. And as I was reading through the companion, I think there's some really great details in here that maybe people don't know. So I'll just reiterate it really quick. So Alkier was Lan's father. Akir Mandragoran, was very close with his brother, Lane. And Lane's wife, Brayan, again, coming back to the matriarchal society where power among women is very common, became very distraught over Lane's lack of standing and not being chosen for king, made a dare to her husband Lane, who went to the Blasted Lands with a sizable group who followed him and ended up dying there, stripping most of the forts. At which time, Brayan, who I would note isn't considered a dark friend, at least in the companion, plotted with Cowan Gamalin, or Cowan Fairheart, to seize the throne for her son, Isam, which is obviously a character you guys might notice from later on in the series.
Yeah, it is mentioned in the Great Hunt, in the prophecy.
Oh, is he in a prophecy?
We'll have to talk about the prophecy in another episode.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
go ahead, continue.
And Count Fahrenheit is indeed a dark friend. And because of their plotting to seize the throne from Lan's father, essentially enough soldiers are stripped and Malkier gets swarmed by
Stripped from the border forts, right?
border forts, yeah.
Yeah, it said so. Brian, I'm trying to track here. Brian plots with Fairheart to, and Brian is not a dark friend, at least not noted as being a dark friend anywhere. Yeah, there's definitely a strong theme of people doing at least as much damage to our well-being, trying to do the right thing, as people who are intentionally trying to do the wrong thing. So yeah. So she's plotting with Brian is plotting with Fairheart, and Fairheart is a
dark friend.
Okay. Yeah. And so he's doing this intentionally to, bring about the fall, more or less, right?
Yeah. I mean, he could have even been directed by Ishamael at this point, right? Yeah. So anyways, massive numbers of Trollocs pour into Malkier, and Jain Farstrider takes Cowan Fairheart as a prisoner, brings him back to the capital. And because Fairheart was only 2 votes away from being made king against Malkier, instead of having him immediately put to death, he duels him, murders his dark friend ass.
So, man, that guy shows up in all the weirdest places.
Dude, okay, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. And this is what I told you not to read for Jain Farstrider. But this is a side note that
Dude,
I think
how
is
old was
important.
That guy?
So, David, I learned something that I didn't know about Jain Farstrider.
So how old is Lan anyways? Like, I know he's old. He's like 50s.
Yeah.
Right? And so when Matt met Jain Farstrider, he must have been like 70.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna throw a bomb on you, David.
Okay.
About Jain Farstrider.
All right.
Grendel, knowing the true identity of Noel Charon, aka Jain Farstrider,
right,
picked him up because he was famous, to use his age like a beauty spot among her pets. When that proved unsatisfactory, she decided to make other use of him, rather than disposing of him or tossing him out, but she never thought of him as any sort of key player in her plans. She sent Farstrider off to Ibu Dar under very subtle compulsion, not really believing that there was much chance of a cache being there. She chose to use him instead of a dark friend because she had control of Farstrider. None of the other Forsaken knew that, and if Farstrider were to find anything, she wanted it all to herself.
What?
Farstrider managed to work out an excuse subconsciously as to why he was in Ibu Dar chasing after a cache of Ongrel. He knew that there were gaps in his memory.
This is nuts.
He hoped that the memories would return because he felt that the gaps were important in some way. While there, he spied on Jakim Carden, Felian Boda, and Ispan Shafar. Matt encountered him while he was spying on Carden. Jain later helped to save Matt from the Golem and accepted Matt's offer of rooms in the Terrasin Palace. Yeah, it says, by that time, Farstrider was much the worse for wear. He was scrawny and white-haired. His hands had been so badly broken that he could no longer handle a sword. His beak of a nose appeared to have been broken several times, and he had gaps in his teeth. Dude.
What?
I know.
What?
Okay. I know that this is about Malkier, but Like, this is wild, okay?
No way.
This poor bastard got, like, essentially poisoned with the power. Used as a pawn by Shamael. Told about that he was going to blind the eye of the world. Made it to a steading to where he was no longer poisoned anymore.
Wait.
And then immediately got picked up by Grendel.
Wait, hold on. I missed that first part. You
didn't. Okay, so remember how in the Eye of the World they're told that they're going to blind the eye,
right? And but that was from some Aiel.
There was one by the Aiel, one in the dreams of Randall, Thor, Matt, and Perrin, and one by a man who took refuge in a steading.
Okay.
That was that was Jain Farstrider.
Wait, how do you gather that's Jain Farstrider?
Because it's in one, I knew that from reading the book, but two, it's in the companion.
Okay, in like the other parts you didn't just read.
Yeah, sorry. Dude, I mean, Jain Farstrider has a big section.
Yeah, of course he does. Oh, man. Okay. Dude, it's so wild how much is complete at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's so much that the characters interact with each other as characters, as full characters.
Yeah.
And not just characters that are being built as the story's going along.
Yep.
They interact as fully developed characters from the very beginning. It's beautiful.
It is absolutely beautiful.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? We're going to have to come back to Malkier. There's a lot more to talk about there. And there's a lot more to talk about Jain Farstrider. But we are out of time. We're going to have to end this one. Wow. Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening if you're here with us. We had a lot of fun.